The English East India Company provides us with an interesting story of how a group of traders could transform itself into the rulers of the Indian subcontinent. Now, the question which obviously arises here is how could they manage to do so? We know that the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar gave them control over the territory of Bengal. And in fact, it was this success that encouraged them to continue with their policy of expansion in the rest of the country. One method that it took up in order to expand its territories was to fight direct wars with regional kingdoms and annex them into British territories. Two such kingdoms were Mysore and Marathas. In fact, the kingdom of Mysore was one of the strongest regional independent kingdom under the ruler Hyder Ali. Now what happened was, Hyder Ali got to know that the British were actually using his friendship to capture the kingdom of Mysore from him. So naturally he got very enraged and he launched two successive wars against the British known as the First and Second Anglo-Mysore Wars. The British in fact waged 4 wars against the kingdom of Mysore. The first 2 were fought with Hyder Ali and the last 2 were fought with his son Tipu Sultan. In the First Anglo-Mysore War, which was fought between 1767 to 1769, Hyder Ali's forces managed to defeat the British. And in the Second Anglo-Mysore War, which was fought between 1780 to 1784, what happened was Hyder Ali died suddenly of cancer. Now, his son Tipu Sultan continued with the war. However, the war came to an end with both sides signing a peace treaty and neither side gaining a decisive victory. Tipu Sultan, who was the son and successor of Hyder Ali, was close friends with the French, who, as we know, were the greatest enemies of the British. So obviously the British were a little irked by this fact. But when Tipu Sultan attempted to restrict the British spice trade in the Malabar coast, the British officials got very enraged. But when Tipu Sultan attempted to restrict the British spice trade in the Malabar coast, the British officials got very enraged. Tipu Sultan did this by attacking Travancore, the only source of pepper for the British. Now, can you tell me why did this enrage the British so much? Because as we know, pepper was the most demanded Indian product in Britain back then in the 18th century. And if the British lost control over this product, it would mean huge losses for the English East India Company. And the British were obviously not ready to accept that. So, the British decided to wage a war against Tipu Sultan. In the Third Anglo-Mysore War, which was fought between 1790 and 1792, the British, with the help of the Nizam of Hyderabad and the Marathas, defeated Tipu Sultan. Now, why did suddenly the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad decide to help the British? Well, for the Marathas, we know that the Marathas have been the greatest enemies of the kingdom of Mysore for a long time. And so they readily agreed to help the British in their attempt to defeat Mysore. The Nizam of Hyderabad, on his part, was a very ambitious person. He thought that if he would help the British in defeating Mysore, he would be given the kingdom of Mysore as a reward. Now, after their victory in the Third Anglo-Mysore War, the British annexed large parts of Tipu's territories, and these territories were divided among the 3 forces, namely the British, the Nizam of Hyderabad and the Marathas. Tipu Sultan also had to pay a huge sum of money as a fine and had to send 2 of his sons as hostages to the British camp. Now, around this time, in 1798, Lord Wellesley, who was the then Governor General of India, introduced the policy of subsidiary alliance. In this policy, the regional ruler who accepted this alliance became a puppet in the British hands, and the actual administrative control lay with the British. We will see what this was about in more details soon. When Tipu Sultan refused to accept and sign the Subsidiary alliance, the British attacked his forces, and thus the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War was fought between 1798 and 1799. The British, again with the help of Nizam of Hyderabad, defeated the forces of Tipu Sultan, and Tipu Sultan was killed in this battle in 1799 while he was defending his capital at Seringapatam. After Tipu Sultan's death and after their victory at the Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, the British annexed large parts of Tipu Sultan's territory. Out of these, they gifted a few to the Nizam of Hyderabad as a token of gratitude. The remaining few territories were given to an heir of the Wadiyar family who ruled before Hyder Ali. This was done only after he signed the Subsidiary alliance with the British. Thus, the Kingdom of Mysore now came under the British control. The Maratha Empire, which was one of the largest empires India has ever seen, was also annexed to the British Dominion by fighting direct wars with them. In the First Anglo-Maratha War between 1775 and 1782, the Marathas defeated the British. This was launched against the British by the Marathas mainly because they were really unhappy about the fact that the British were continuously interfering in their internal politics. In the Second Anglo-Maratha War, which was fought between 1803 and 1806, the British were again defeated. But this time, they were able to secure some territories by signing a mutual treaty with the Marathas. After this, the British set about conquering some more Indian territories to make themselves even more powerful. Between 1817 and 1818, the third and the final Anglo-Maratha War was fought. In this war, the Marathas were led by Peshwa Bajirao II. However, Peshwa Bajirao II and the Marathas were defeated, and the Peshwa was exiled to Bithur, which is near today's Kanpur. The post of the Peshwa was also abolished by the British, and all Maratha chiefs were made to sign the Subsidiary alliance. Satara, which was one of the strongest territories held by the Marathas, were now placed under the control of a descendant of Shivaji, who in fact was almost under the complete control of the British. So, when did the Third Anglo-Maratha War end? Was it in 1815, 1826, 1832 or 1818? The correct answer is 1818. After fighting a series of wars with Mysore and the Marathas, the British realized that fighting direct wars were costing them heavily. And the British government in England, as well as the board of directors of the English East India Company in India, refused to fund the British army with any more money to fight wars. Thus, what the British did was they adopted a strategical form of expansion. What was this? The British introduced new strategies to conquer the Indian territories without having to fight direct wars with them. One such strategy was the policy of Subsidiary alliance, which was introduced by Lord Richard Wellesley in the year 1798. Now, what was this policy? According to the alliance, the British would give military protection to regional rulers. In return, the regional rulers had to provide the following. They had to accept British overlordship over their territories. The British would be given complete control of the foreign relations of the state. What does this mean? That the ruler of this territory could not fight wars or form an alliance with another state without securing permission from the British. And a British resident would be stationed at the royal court. This was mainly because so that the British could actually oversee what was going on in the ruler's court. Finally, the ruler of the state had to maintain British troops which would be providing this military protection to the regional rulers. So basically, the ruler had to maintain the British troops out of his own pocket to maintain its own security. As it turns out, the Nizam of Hyderabad, Asaf Jah II, was the first Indian ruler to sign the subsidiary alliance with the British in the year 1798. Another strategical form of expansion that the British adopted was the policy of Doctrine of Lapse. This was introduced by Lord Dalhousie in the year 1847. This doctrine basically allowed the British to take over territories of the rulers who did not have a natural heir to the throne or who adopted an heir to the throne without securing the British permission. In that case, the territory controlled by that ruler would come under British control, while that adopted heir could only inherit the personal property of the ruler. Several Indian kingdoms like that of Jaipur, Udaipur, Satara, Nagpur, Sambalpur and Jhansi came under British control using the Doctrine of Lapse. Now, in the year 1853, Jhansi was annexed to the British kingdom by the Doctrine of Lapse. However, the case of Jhansi was a little bit different than the other kingdoms. What happened was, in 1853, the ruler of Jhansi had died without any natural heir. The king's wife, who is known as Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, became the regent. They had an adopted heir called Anand Rao. When the British did not accept his demand for inheritance of the kingdom of Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai launched a war against the British. But she was defeated and the kingdom of Jhansi was anyway annexed by the British to their dominion. Now you might ask that why did these Indian rulers accept this form of injustice on the British part? Well, you see, by the 1850s, the British had conquered almost all of India, and these rulers were really afraid of the fact of waging a war against the British because they knew they were not powerful enough to defeat the British in a war. However, the British injustice did not stop here. What happened was, when Awadh was brought under British control in the year 1756 after the Battle of Buxar, the British had promised the Nawab of Awadh that they would never annex that kingdom if the Nawab helped the British fighting their wars against other territories. All the Nawabs of Awadh thereon did so. Especially Nawab Wajid Ali Shah was extremely loyal to the British. But in the year 1856, the British broke its promise and annexed the state of Awadh on the pretext of alleged misrule. They declared that the Nawab of Awadh was torturing its subjects and the situation could be brought under control only if the British go there. After this, Nawab Wajid Ali Shah was sent in exile with his family to Calcutta and the British took over control of Awadh. And what the British did was that they took away the titles of the soldiers, the aristocrats and the officials who were already serving under the then Nawab of Awadh. Thus, the state of Awadh came under an even more distressful situation. Let's now take a quick recap at how the British expanded their territories in India. So, by 1765, the territory of Bengal came under British control after their continuous defeat in the Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. In 1798, the Nizam of Hyderabad signed the subsidiary alliance with the British, thus giving the control of Hyderabad to the British. In 1799, with the death of Tipu Sultan, the kingdom of Mysore came under the control of the British. After their defeat in the Third Anglo-Maratha War in 1818, the entire Maratha Empire came under the British control. Among these were territories like Jaipur, Jhansi, Sambalpur, Nagpur, Satara and Udaipur, all of which were brought under British control by Lord Dalhousie's Doctrine of Lapse. And finally, in 1856, the British annexed Awadh to its territories. So as we see, by 1856, almost the entire Indian territory came under the control of the English East India Company. This situation changed 2 years later when, in 1858, this territory was brought under direct control of the British government, or the British Raj as it was known. We will learn how this happened very soon. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So, at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So, register for free now.